Good afternoon, friends. Heidi Mitro here, and we are going live. I am waiting for Mike to join me here. I am out in our home studio, and Mike is inside as we are still navigating kind of the changing of the guard from like sheltering in place and being at home and finishing up the school year and final Zoom meetings and all of those things that we are all kind of navigating right now. But I told you we're coming live at 2:15, so that is what we are doing, and Mike will be here shortly. So right now, obviously, we are in an unprecedented time in so many ways and for so many reasons. And the intention of our conversation today, and this really is meant to be a conversation between me and Mike, is not to have it all figured out. It isn't to claim to be experts on race or social justice, or even to really try to unpack how complex what's happening is. But our intention behind going live and behind sharing our individual story is to really be in a place where we are leading awkwardly by example. So I'm going to let him in here. Hey, man. Can you hear me? So Mike's joining us here from inside of our house, which is wonderful. There you are. Hi, honey. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're already live. So welcome.
Excellent.
from the studio.
Traffic was ridiculous. I'm sorry.
Yeah, shit happens, right? So I was basically introducing who we are, what we're doing, kind of what we're not doing, which is not trying to be the experts in race or social justice, but to really kind of give a glimpse into what happens in our home. And so I'm going to adjust this here, and then I'm actually going to record this, so we have it for future. So let's do that. So again, friends, welcome. I am Heidi Mitro, and joining me from inside of our home is my husband, Michael Mitro. And we are here to talk to you today about race and self-reflection and social justice and what that actually means in the context of our home, where obviously we are a mixed race couple. And it puts us in a unique position within our home to be talking about race and to be talking about, well, gender roles, to be talking about parenting. We have a unique perspective that may be beneficial to share. So Mike, would you mind introducing who you are and just a little bit about your background?
Right. Yeah. I'm Mike. I'm Heidi's husband, and I spent the majority, I think it's safe to say, formative years anyway, in a pretty liberal, very racially diverse community growing up in Oberlin, Ohio. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's a small town in northeastern Ohio, and the university there, Oberlin College, is a liberal arts college with a very famous conservatory of music, and Oberlin was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and I, growing up, was able to be a participant visually and watch these students demand social justice. Social justice was just something that was in the air, I think, growing up. Because of our location, most of the communities around us it was a pretty rural. It's about 45 minutes west of Cleveland, agriculturally based part of the state. But then in the middle east, this very white part of the state is this pocket of a community with a lot of Black people. The college was the first university in the country to allow African Americans or Black folks to attend school post high school. And so historically and culturally, there's a lot of significance. I remember watching college students protest and riot, against apartheid in the 80s. Desmond Tutu came and spoke at one of the commencement ceremonies when I think I was in junior high, might have been 6th or 7th grade. So that instilled a level of like this justice mentality and the pursuit of equality and at a young age. And then we moved.
Can you explain about living in a multiracial family growing up? Can you
so
share that part of your story?
Yeah, I'm adopted, and my parents are both white, and my older sister is white, and then I have an older brother who's Korean and 2 younger brothers who are also Black. And so we were a very unique family in a lot of senses, in a lot of regards, everywhere we went. Even in Oberlin, it was unusual to have a family with that much of a culture diversity.
One of the stories that has always been very poignant that you shared was getting to, might have even been kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what I'm talking about?
So growing up, yes, it wasn't a topic of conversation when we were really little. And so we were just a family, right? I had 3 brothers and a sister and a mom and a dad. And then I remember when I started, it was 1st grade, we had just moved to Oberlin. And I remember looking at all the other families and thinking, our family doesn't look like their family. Like everybody in those families, they all look the same, And so that's a very clear distinction. I remember very vividly the bench outside the principal's office. My brother Greg and I were sitting on the bench, and my dad was in talking to the principal, Miss Toss.
What's up, Miss Toss?
And I just remember watching all the kids come in, and then I kind of remember it was the first day of school, so parents were coming in with them, and it was just like, wow, that's weird,
Did you talk about it as a family, or was it more of a thing within?
I really.
Oh, you're freezing here, buddy. I can't see you. Hold on, we're gonna give it a minute to come back. I'm gonna see what's happening here.
Then that kind of.
You cut out there for a little bit, babe. Are you on the high internet? You're cutting out about every other word here. We're going to give Mike a chance to figure out what's happening inside of our house.
Oh, hey.
Hey, where are you?
I'm back.
Did you change internet at all? Or are you on the, okay.
No, I changed just.
Okay. So I asked, did you guys talk about it? And then
I said, no, I don't remember specifically having a conversation around that. The first time I really remember having a conversation about race was after I came home from school after getting into a fight with a kid when I was a sophomore in high school. And then my parents were very, it was very important to them. This I also remember very distinctly, that I had access to whatever information I needed to try and help me understand, the root cause of, the causes as they perceived them to be, in the 80s and early 90s around racism, and then, actively pursue ways to interact. And we moved to Mankato when I was a junior in high school, and that was I just remember being like, I'm the only brown person. I'm the only black person in this,
Yeah.
you know. There was another family that moved there shortly around the same time that we did. Their father was ROTC, the ROTC guy at Mankato State, and so we bonded, you know, in our collective blackhood, and it's a, you know, they had the Pan African Conference at the university, and so that, I mean, the university was a very diverse place, but like, you know, regular society outside of the school was not, and so that
At
was a place
Mankato
where
or Oberlin?
at Mankato. Oberlin was just it was a very diverse place. The university, you know, the town itself.
Okay.
I want to say, I don't quote me on this, but it was at least like a 60-40 split, maybe 50-50 even, African American to, you know, to white kids. So,
Hmm.
um,
I mean, I
but
know that that had to be, well, I mean, you can talk about the culture shock, but I am also eternally grateful that you ended up in Mankato, or you and I
yeah,
never, I mean, super selfishly,
no,
I'm
I mean,
I'm grateful for the move to Mankato.
it seems to work out, you know, that way sometimes, but
Well, and for
and
those of you that don't know where Mankato is, in southern part of the state in Minnesota, and my hometown is about 20 miles from there, which is how we met
hmm
20
yeah.
something years ago.
So that's kind of that's, I don't know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So what about you? What's your story?
Well, I mean, alluding to geography, I grew up in a small town called Waseca, southern Minnesota, and I mean, we had very few people of color anywhere. I mean, it wasn't the thing, and it was an assumption that if there was anybody of color in town, that they were from Chicago. That was like the that was the thing, and I was never like I grew up religious. I grew up Catholic. I grew up that you are a good person and you are kind and you are. Um, both of my parents are, you know, good people and involved in our community and involved in the church. And I grew up still really sheltered, based on geography and just based on where we, you know, where we lived. But Mike and I met. I was a senior in high school, and I was taking college classes at Mankato State that the high school actually paid for. And I was sitting outside my um, our cultural anthropology class, and I always hated the first day of school because I was always afraid I was in the wrong place. I still have that feeling like I'm always in the wrong place, like, oh shit. And so I would always ask someone who was standing at the door, like, is this whatever class? But I was sitting outside, and Mike came around the corner, and I was like, oh my God, like, he's so cute. Like, I hope he's in my class. And you can blush, it's fine. Um, and he's got a saunter. For those of you that know him, Mike has a very distinct walk. And it was so, I'm going to get a little like romantic dramatic, but it was like I watched him make an entrance, is what it felt like. And um, it took us a while to get to the point where we were dating. It took us years, actually. But Mike had asked me if I wanted to study for a test because I was a total nerd. I sat up front and I took notes, and I that class was amazing. Dr. Brown was that was a great class, but I didn't want to tell Mike I was in high school. We had a 7-year age split, but
Yeah,
um,
I think she said I have to go home or something like that, and I was like,
I had a choir
I assumed
concert.
she meant like back to Minneapolis
Well,
or
he asked me
wherever
if
home
I
was.
went home often.
Yeah.
It's written in my journal if you want it
Okay.
documented.
Well, I'm gonna take your word for it.
Yeah, but I was like, I go home every day, you know, like I'm in high school. And he didn't even bat an eye. And it wasn't like a romantic overture. It was like, well, hey, do you want to get a cup of coffee? And like we started out really truly as friends. Like I thought you were so beautiful. I still do, I know. But I also remember being very afraid to talk about you. Like, what would that mean? What would that look like? How would my community, family, friends, what would they think I remember that. And I did not grow up having a whole lot of interaction with anybody of color. And meeting you, I mean, I remember as years later, as we started dating and as you became a part of our family, like we still had some bumps in the road. We still had to kind of work that through. But I also remember feeling, I remember feeling like it was highlighted, but not talked about. And I do feel like we are in part of culture now where it's highlighted and it's being talked about. And I think that's really, as a segue, why you and I want to have this conversation, because we've been having conversations about race since the beginning. Really, truly, like,
Mm-hmm.
and getting married and, having kids who are multiracial, but also, are going to pass for white. Like we've had those conversations. And I think the reason that we want to talk today is just to start the conversation here, but continue the conversation between one another. And as we were talking about what we wanted to share and what kind of action we wanted to inspire, Mike started talking about, this is about race, but this is about self-reflection. And I don't know if you can remember what you said, but I'm hopeful that you can with the prompt. It was so well, I know, stuff. But it was so well said about you and I are having our own individual micro experiences based on the color of our skin. Mm-hmm. I'm having my own awakening of sorts, and you are having your experience. But I'm curious. I want to put a focus on the self-reflection piece right now and see where you go.
Okay. Well, I mean, I gave you the analogy as it correlates to fitness. That's how, that's where the majority of.
And you have a background in personal training for those that don't know.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And so there's a level of self-reflection that is required to make any kind of significant change in that. It's the same for fitness and health as it is for social change, and it starts in here. I think that's how we kind of got on that topic, where it's like the only time like it relates to fitness, like if you want to make significant changes in the way that you're eating, then you are the only person who can do that. Like, and you have
or if you want to make significant change in your family, like
right.
If you want your family's culture to change,
it starts with you. You have to look inside and be willing to have some critique of your outward expression of whatever it is that you're hoping to change. It's, if you pretend it's not there, that's just it. I mean, I think we've all heard it. It's the same thing as not doing anything at all, right? If you can and are everyone is capable. I think we touched on that. Everyone's capable of having self-reflection, but not everyone is willing.
Right.
And so,
what do you think it takes for someone to be willing?
Usually, this is my experience with people who make significant changes in their lives from a health perspective. It takes a tragedy. It takes something, a health scare. It takes something that puts the fear of God in them, not to put a finer point in it, mm-hmm. For them to be like, okay, shit, man, this is scary. And that's, I think, what we're seeing happen on a massive scale right now.
Right. I mean, I know that's been my experience, where it's like, why am I only as activated as I am now? And I'm trying to have some grace with myself around that and hold myself accountable. But this is a national trauma.
It's an international trauma.
Well said. Yeah. And it's a repeated trauma, right? Like this isn't. I don't mean it to be that this hasn't happened. I don't mean that. But mm-hmm. What I'm saying is, like, it's collective on a different scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even that sounds insufficient, but I think you know what I'm saying.
I do know. And so here's my here's my hope, is that enough people who are activated or triggered or outraged are capable. Well, everyone's capable. Enough people are willing to start here. I was talking about the ripple effect earlier, and how what you do, how you react, how you conduct yourself is directly impacts how those people around you react and conduct themselves. And then you start to see where the disconnect is. Because if you start to conduct yourself in a way where all right, I need to make some changes here, and people are either angered or repelled by that, then you know that those people are not there yet. And so, but you still have to continue to do the work. People's responses or feelings be damned at this point,
Right. Well, and I think that as a body mind coach, and you've been through body mind coaching as well, and I talked about this, with my colleagues over the last several days, like, you have to feel this in order to heal it. Like, you must feel it. And the title of my coaching business is The New Next Level. And I had a conversation this morning with a colleague, and I was like, I have to be really careful what I name shit, because the new next there's no bottom to the new next level of consciousness, or the new next level of healing, or the new next level of social justice. Like, I feel like our family has hit a new next level. And Mike and I are having really different experiences right now, and I'm reckoning differently. And I am curious how this international tragedy, this international trauma, what is being brought up for you as a Black man living in another small rural white town. What's being activated for you, and how are you affected?
I started it with like a high level of anger, and then I went on a walk with someone, and
oh boy,
and we found a different way for me to contribute that didn't involve like driving into Minneapolis. And
I know, and I still think about it. I wonder what would have happened had I said go. And for those of you that don't know this story, Mike and I went for a walk, and he was saying he wanted to put a thing out on Facebook that he'd come and pick up donations and drive to Minneapolis, and he wanted my support. And I this will always 100% support you. Mm-hmm. And I could not support that action. This is, the day after the first night of riots, and I was terrified. And I said to Mike, I'm safer to go into Minneapolis right now than you are. Like, I couldn't breathe around it. It sounds so fucking lame to say that, but I couldn't catch my breath around you going. I couldn't. And I understand the selfishness, and I understand how that may be perceived. But when I see a Black man killed, how do I not think of you? Sorry. I couldn't, at that moment when you were talking about it, I couldn't do it. I couldn't articulate to you, because then it felt like it was about me. And we're having those awkward conversations right now. Like, Mike, I don't want to make this about the white woman feeling sad about her fucking white privilege shame, because that's what's happening. But I also, what ended up happening was I came out and worked, right? And I was in the studio.
We said nothing for the rest of the walk. Let's start there. Like, neither one of us
did. Well, I think we got to the point where it was like, no matter what you say, no matter what I say, we can't agree yet. And so to say nothing is sometimes, I think, the right thing.
Yeah.
And if those of you that are experiencing the need to say nothing right now, as long as that is a pause in your journey, continue to say nothing until you. But then what happened after we?
So then I guess I went to work, man. I just
Why
it was
did you not go? Why did you not say fuck you, Heidi? I'm going to do it anyway.
because
What shifted?
I had some time to kind of let my judgment have clearer vision.
Do you feel like I usurped you?
No, I don't. I feel like it allowed me the opportunity then to like, okay, how can I do this in a way that could potentially be most beneficial and and sustainable on some level. Like
Mm.
I couldn't drive around to individual places and pick up stuff from people and have it be efficient or
I fully anticipated that when I came in from doing my calls that you were going to be gone. I really thought you were going to be gone.
Okay.
I did.
Well, so then I just started reaching out to people and asking for help. Like, how can we do this as a community? How can we make this something that we can be proud of? How can we do this in a way that will show other people, I guess, like talking about that ripple effect, like, and how what you do impacts those around you, and people, stepped up and came out of the work, and people that I didn't even know,
What happened? So for the
so
people that
I asked for Mimi's and the co-op if they would take donations of food and other supplies for a couple of days.
How did you get connected with Jen?
She was posting on Facebook. Jen is Heidi's and my
Our cousin.
She works in an organization in Minneapolis that supports.
Your computer's moving all over the place, by the way, dude.
It's because it's sitting on my lap, like.
Oh.
And I'm getting animated. So I reached out to her to find out if there were places that she knew of that were accepting donations of food. That was the first piece of it. And so then we started talking, and it kind of morphed from there. They support families and with food, supplies, and an education program.
And sports.
With sports and math together.
So good.
So cool. And so we started communicating back and forth, and I'm finding out what they need, and then I'm asking people if they can accept donations, and then I'll come pick them up, and so it has turned into somewhat of a community project now, and
right.
We're continuing to accept donations. We made a run to Minneapolis yesterday and dropped off 4 carloads of food in 2 different places, but at least 80 families were provided with food for the next couple of days at least,
Right.
So that's 8, and I keep saying that's 80 families, not 80 people,
Right.
And so and then we're continuing to collect. We've got community members who are stepping up and helping to sort, categorize, box, and label all of this stuff, so that and
it's all the stuff that you didn't know was going to need to happen, but you just figured out as you go.
Yep. And and I think the piece that I think is the most interesting to me is that this is not something that I want to do for attention or for accolades or anything like that. I think it was like, okay, if I can start the ball rolling and give people something to do, like people want to help, people they want a job to something to do, to feel to contribute. There are lots of different things that can be under the category of contribution, whether it's going down to the state capitol or the governor's mansion and protesting peacefully, or cleaning up the remains of a neighborhood, which just breaks my heart to say out loud.
I know.
Or
you're frozen here, but I can hear you.
People need food.
Yeah.
People need. One of the things that was in the kits that we collected yesterday was diabetes test kits. I would have never thought about that, but I talked to Jen, and she's like, yes, we've got a lot of people in this neighborhood who need to be able to test. They've got type 2 diabetes or whatever the thing is. It's those things that you didn't think you would need, but are very impactful. And so
what I'm hearing you say is that there's a for you, the desire and the need to do something, it clicked in a different way. And I think especially over the last couple of years, your desire to contribute and to tentatively and reluctantly be seen as a leader, right? Like, I think that there's like it has to matter enough to do something about
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And what I've witnessed is you lead by example. And I know you're not doing it for accolades and all of that, and you still deserve that. And I know that's not the point. But I think what we have learned as a family is that you don't have to know the whole thing. Just do that first thing where you're led. And to me, that's embodied.
Mhm.
That's guided. That's spiritual. That's connected. But it's based on self-reflection.
Yes. And that is the thing. Okay. Like if, and we have to get around to this at some point, so I'm just going to do it right
Yeah,
now.
please.
And it is that if you don't see an issue with the things that are happening right now, like if you then there's a then you're not there yet, right? Like this isn't activated enough for you. This isn't tragic enough for you to take a step back and say, where am I contributing either consciously or unconsciously to a system that is inherently broken?
Yeah.
And so that is,
Or was as Brene Brown had said yesterday or pointed out, or I don't know, talked about, like, it's not actually broken. It was built that
mhm,
way, right?
yep. And so that is where the self-reflection comes into this conversation, right? Where it's like, just because it doesn't affect you directly doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I think
Or that
that's
it doesn't actually really affect you,
right, because it does.
right?
And
Can you give an example of that? I think that's an important thing where it's like,
we're
what's it does affect all of us,
right.
but for someone who's living in our little town, who's going to work, trying to figure out how to go to work, social distancing, has
Hmm.
not maybe had an experience with anybody other than white people, or do you know
Hmm.
know what the question I'm
Right.
asking?
I do. And so it's the little things that make like the perpetuation of a culture that um, like not saying something when somebody at the water cooler or in the break room makes a disparaging comment about something happening on television or a joke, because that the subject is not in the room, right?
Yeah.
And so then it's okay. It's that closed behind the door conversation on a different scale, different level,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
you know it's wrong. And so anytime you don't say something, then it reinforces that.
Right. But
Anytime
that,
you,
I'm going to say this because I understand the example, but I also think, how does that hurt them to not, like, so they don't say something? I'm just playing
right?
antagonist. Who
No, that's
cares?
fine. So then, you know, that person then, and I mean, this is, I don't have
I
a
know.
specific example of this, but like then that person continues and maybe they get into a fight with somebody because they don't look like that. You know what I mean? Like it
The ripple
just,
effect that way.
yeah, it's just give a pause, give them pause, give them something to think about. Like, oh, people are listening to what I'm saying, and it's hard because if everybody's doing it, you don't want to be the one, but now you have to be the one.
Well, and I've had people say, racist jokes to me. And well, this isn't about Mike, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked, I've had clients say to me, well, Mike is one of the good ones.
Yeah.
And for me, some of that was like such you're shocked into silence where you're like, is that really fucking happened? Like, how do you begin to address that? How do you begin to say, and some of it, I didn't. or I would say like, you got to be mindful of like one of the good, like, what do you mean by
Mhm.
that? And coming at it from a business perspective, this is a client. There's so many dynamics in play, but being now it's open. Now the conversation is national news on the nightly. People are protesting in London, in New Zealand, and Germany, and 20 miles from here.
And
And
here.
here, true.
Mhm.
And as a white person, if I was in high school and we had one black kid in our class, maybe two. If I had heard a racist joke, nobody would call anybody out and it wouldn't have affected me immediately.
Mhm.
There would not have been any. This is why I'm bringing this forward, because I think in our circle, because people know us or they know you, well, I'm not racist because I know Mike.
Mhm.
Well, this joke's not about Mike because he's one of the good ones.
Mhm.
Whatever that means, we could do 3 hours on what that means. But the self-reflection piece, I'm married to you. Like we have been fucking through it.
Mhm.
I'm committed to our marriage and our family and our individual personal growth. And I am uncovering my white privilege and my benefit from a racist society and my racist biases, and you're in the next room from me. And so what I'm saying in this conversation is, just because you know and love a black person does not mean that you haven't benefited from white privilege. Just because you know Mike personally doesn't mean that he's not dealing with shit that you have no idea. Right? Like, you don't get a pass because you know and love a black person. We still have work to dismantle. And the conversation's open and it's so fucking awkward. But my being awkward is nothing compared to a man being murdered on because he's black. Like,
Mhm.
I be fucking awkward, Heidi. Like, who cares about your awkwardness right now is what. So you and I are navigating different
Yeah.
stories. So while Mike is organizing, I can do social media stuff. I can do kind of the behind the scenes stuff. But what's happening is I'm reckoning with my own privilege, and I'm downloading books and resources and making donations, and I'm doing all the typical white person shit right now. But we're also organizing as a family. We're organizing as a couple. The new next level of conversations that have happened in our house in the last week, it's fucking painful and
Yeah.
necessary.
I mean, it's an inevitability that there are going to be people who don't see, like, what are people so mad about, you know? Like,
How does
um
that feel to you when people say that?
it feels disingenuous, and um it feels like um elitist on some level. Like I have the luxury of sitting in my house and not having to deal with this. So I mean, why can't you just go home and be happy,
Right?
you know? And that doesn't work. Like, I was
Do you remember how old you were when you first recognized that being black in white America was dangerous?
I fifth grade, fourth grade, probably. Um,
Dude, that's fucking Theo and Noah.
mhm.
What happened?
Oh, there was I can't remember. It was I want to say there was um a confrontation on campus, um around an anti-apartheid protest, and there were people who came in to stir up trouble, you know, and I remember thinking, well, first of all, like, apartheid, okay, and then I
Did you know
remember
what that meant at that time?
yes, I mean, it was everywhere. Like these 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids were, they were talking to anybody who would listen. They were activists, and what I don't remember the exact context of the conversation, but I remember them saying like, there's a version of this that's still happening here, and so again, I think that was one of those impactful, informative instances that has stuck with me, somewhere in the back of my subconscious, this whole, and so my job, my mission, I feel like, is to, to help be part of the solution and rebuilding process. Like we talked about compartmentalization, right? Like,
Yep.
And that's part of the problem is like racial issues are a Black person's issues. They're not my issues because they don't affect me because I don't live near any Black people. So the race is a Black person's issue. Sexual assault and domestic violence, that's a woman's issue. And gay rights and LGBTQ people's issues are their issues. And so, but the fact of the matter is that they're all interconnected.
Right.
And I've had conversations with several people on this topic over the last couple of days. And every time I just get whipped up even more. But until we get to the point where we can decompartmentalize all of these issues, nothing changes. And I think we're in the process of seeing that happen right now.
I had a conversation this morning with a coaching friend, and we were talking about, the key to that is connection. And it sounds so trite, but it's true.
It's true. Yeah.
Connection with self, connection with planet, connection with each other, connection with,
We're suspicious of things that are different. It's inherent. It's evolutionary. It's in our DNA.
Right.
Anything. We're not conditioned to look at the positive, especially of anything different. So I think about the isolationist mentality of the way that our neighborhoods are set up now, for the most part. Like people come home and they don't.
You close the garage door, Mike.
Yeah,
all the time, every day. Mike has a thing about keeping the garage door closed. It drives me fucking crazy. I'm like, dude. And understood. What was it? From the front porch to the back deck? You had that conversation with someone where it used to be, we all had front porches and you saw everybody.
Everybody would sit out there and they'd talk to their neighbors and
right.
And I get it. People are busier than ever right now.
Well,
not right now, but I mean, in up until this point, people are working 2 jobs. They're working 12 hours a day. Nobody, like I understand that. And the compartmentalization, the individualization has created a very self-centered society also. Right. Like if it doesn't.
Well, I remember us having a conversation, maybe, I don't know, all the days are running together, but you were like, you have to seek this out. Like you have to have a conversation with someone who doesn't look like you. And we had not an argument, but like a heated conversation about like, who's going to fucking do that? Who is going to do that? Who is going to seek out opportunities to make themselves uncomfortable? Who's going to seek out?
And that's the operative word. You have to be uncomfortable. Otherwise,
I hate that.
Nothing changes unless you're willing to step into that zone of like.
I know, but I don't like that. The bottom has fallen out, and that even in and of itself is a privileged thing to say. Like, for you, your bottom fell out, but it's like there is an element of discomfort. And I think that's another reason why I wanted us to have a conversation is people are looking for like, how do I talk about this? I know that people have reached out to you because they're reaching out to me. And I think the people are different who are reaching out to either of us, but can you explain some of the common themes of people reaching out and maybe offer some self-reflection or some opportunity for growth? Can I say it like that? What am I, what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the common thing that people are reaching out?
The theme is, I'm sorry that you're going through this. That's one of the themes. And my
And what,
response to that was, no, we're going through this. Like, it's no longer, um, it's no longer like, oh, I feel sorry for you. It's like, no, I feel sorry for us.
yeah,
And so I think the idea that, again, that it's this is a Mike problem, or this is a Black person's problem, is it's
yeah.
that's where the narrative has to change. And I think we're seeing that. I do. And but it has to continue. Like, we have to be able to have continual conversations. It can't be, okay, well, they arrested, one of the cops.
Mhm.
Cool. Let's
It's
rebuild
over.
and move
Yeah,
on. That shit isn't going to fly now. Like, and it shouldn't have before, but
I know. I
here
know.
we are. But here we are. So, um,
How do you do self-reflection? What are the action steps of self-reflection? Because it sounds like a good buzzword, but I'm curious for you personally, what does self-reflection,
it's
well, when do you remember being
contextual, man. Like,
when did you start self-reflection? I'm trying to like,
I think I mean, as someone who enjoys fitness,
mm,
like, if you are trying to get somewhere, if you're trying to achieve a goal and you're not getting it, you have to figure out why, right? And so
mhm,
a requirement for progress, whether it is physical or emotional or mental, like, it's a requirement.
yep, okay,
And so I think that's where it started, and then it just, nobody gets it 100% right. There is no 100. There's no right way to do it, but I mean, it is a necessary action step
right.
to take. And
Well,
so
and I think that self-reflection, it's kind of like people come to a place of change. That's how people showed up when I was a massage therapist. Usually they were so suffering and
mhm.
I was the last resort.
Yeah,
And
the same thing for
it's
training. Like, I mean, not for everyone, but a lot of the people who have come to me as a trainer is because they had a health scare, or they lost a loved one,
mhm,
or, you know, they realized that, it was now or never.
right. And I
And
think the
it
fear
is
aspect
now,
is real.
it's now or never, right now.
Yeah. But self-reflection isn't enough. What's
No,
what's happening
so
is,
you have to, if you are willing to participate in the experiment of self-reflection, then that's one step, and that's a step in the process. And then the next step is the action steps that you take after that. And that could be any number of things for people, depending on person to person. But
and I think part of what's happening too is we live in such an immediate, I want to do it now. Like people would come to you on the first workout, but want to be there after picture 6 months from now. And we don't have any
on day two.
patience. Exactly. Like we don't have any, I still don't have patience where it's like, I ate a salad for lunch. Why am I not skinny? Right. Like that's the mentality we live in. We literally, our children can ask Google anything. You don't have to be curious that long in
Mm-hmm.
our culture. And that is people reaching out to me like, I'm so sorry this is happening to Mike. I can't imagine what this is like for him. I can't imagine what this is like for you. Those messages, or thank you guys for organizing, which this is Mike organizing. Like I I'm responding in a way that's different, which is like, yes, and read this book. Me
Mm-hmm.
and White Supremacy, White Fragility, any of these books that are Google it, right? Or look at my feed over the last several days. Um, but self-reflection requires longevity, and we have a really short attention span in our culture. And I think that's why the riots lasting and the protesting lasting for days and days and days feels very unusual to me, because usually it's like a quick soundbite, even in 24-hour news, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but self-reflection requires doing it when nobody's looking too. And I know that, us being out and exposed and like talking about it is how you and I feel called to serve. Not everybody's going to feel called to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody can take this as a pause. But once self-reflection is Pandora's box. I think you and I have had a lot of Pandora's boxes over the last 20 something years.
Pandora's chasm,
Pandora's like freaking, yeah,
nesting doll.
Russian nesting dolls. But there's will always be more to do, which is why, as you are participating in social justice, as you are participating in awkward conversations about race, it's also important to take care of yourself as you are able, and not from a, I call it bubble baths and bullshit perspective, but from like a disconnect if you need to, take a news hiatus. You and I tried to take a news hiatus. That did not work for us.
No.
But I also feel, I feel led and I feel called. And I also took a 2-hour nap yesterday afternoon. I passed out, What do you want people that want to reach out to you but don't know how? People that may want to reach out to their other Black friends but don't know what to say. Go ahead.
I would encourage people to start here.
What do you mean?
Like, start with themselves. Like, just, I don't know. It's happening to all of us. It's not just happening to Black people, right? Like, it's, yes, it is a racist system, built on oppression and suppression and exclusion
And slavery.
And I used the analogy a couple of times today already of like, you can continually reside your house, but if the frame's, rotten with termites, it's going to fall down,
Right.
And so I don't know, just, I don't know. I think it requires, I think it requires action for the, for the greater good, and also, like, what has my role been, either, like I said, consciously or unconsciously, and because I think it's someone else will do it,
Well, sure. I mean, I've been in that camp for lots of things, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
I have not wanted to be I'm swirling in shame. I haven't wanted to be the token multiracial couple. Yeah. Like, I don't bring up race a lot of times when it could be brought up, because I didn't know how, like, people know us, and when people would find out that I was married to you, you could almost see people recalculate if they'd said anything racist to me, right? If people would finally see our family picture or whatever at the studio, and there was not with everybody, but there was an inevitability of shock that I wasn't married to a white guy. And sure. The uncomfortability, the discomfortability, what is the word? It's open now. We have to talk about it. And mm-hmm. For those of us white women, especially, who feel like this doesn't affect us, I don't talk about race with a lot of people, but when racial things happen, I'm always going to put it into the context of you. Always. And now being able to speak about that differently, or being willing to speak about it now mm-hmm. differently. I was never going to post anything about you running. Like, you sharing your Google location with me has been happening for a while. Like, yeah. I was never going to talk about that. I didn't want to be seen as complaining, or I didn't want to be seen as like taking advantage of a narrative or whatever. But it's like, white friends in River Falls, like, this isn't, don't just post your outrage about Ahmaud Arbery. Like, this is this is Mike. This is happening still. This is happening here. This is there's I don't know what my point is.
I mean,
save me here. Help me.
I think about it all the time, and we've talked about it, you know, and at the same time, what do you do? You know, I continue to do my life, like, um, and I think I mean, I can't change other people's perceptions of me. I can only control how I present myself and how I interact with the world. And my goal is to be, you know, um, a compassionate, kind, giving, generous person, and I want those people around me to do the same.
Right. Well, and I think it's the lead by example thing, but I also think it's complex, and there's so many layers to leadership. And you and I are in a position now where I think we've both owned our leadership title, maybe reluctantly, or maybe like, oh, that's what we do. Like, if there's a problem, we want to be a part of that solution. But I also think there's an element of having people claim their leadership within themselves and within their family. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is their opportunity to lead these conversations first and foremost within themselves.
Yep.
And it's one thing to be willing to be uncomfortable. It's another thing to be uncomfortable. It's another thing to take action
Mm-hmm.
and to for me, I get hot when I'm uncomfortable. My heart races. I don't like how that feels. I will do anything to get rid of it. But the phrasing, what's your racial stamina here? What's your social justice stamina? And I'm learning about mine.
Yeah. And I think in order for things to change, people have to get uncomfortable. And I think relationships are going to be tested and maybe even, changed inexorably, because if people are willing to have the uncomfortable conversation, inevitably they're going to be having those conversations sometimes with people who are not willing to to have those conversations.
Right.
And it's too important. Like, I mean, I'm not even in this for myself, man. This is about my kids and their future and the world that they're going to become adults in.
Right.
And this is not the shit I want them to have to deal with. This should,
Right.
I mean, it's not, they didn't do this.
Right. And as a family, I mean, we've got our family values. Like, I never thought I'd be a family values person. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I hit a lot of different categories. I've been called lots of things by lots of people. And be careful, Heidi, you're sounding like a Republican, or be careful, you're sounding like a libertarian, or be careful, you sound like a Christian. Like, I've been called a lot of things. But family values for us is our compass. And we talk about peace, and we talk about family, and we talk about connection and collaboration, and I think we need to add social justice as a family value.
I mean, we have a walking, talking activist in Theo, like that dude.
I know.
That dude will.
Oh my God, I know.
He gets so
He's our
mad.
10-year-old.
And I remember at the age of like 5 or 4, we were sitting in the parking lot of the gas station, and somebody walked by the garbage can and went to throw something in there, and it missed. And before I could even say anything, he had the door open and he jumped out and he picked it up and put it into the garbage can.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, you can't do that.
You can't get out of the van.
You cannot jump out of the van in a busy parking lot like that,
Right.
like, and I mean, I was like, wow, he's affected by that stuff.
I remember Noah, and I think we can wrap. I think we can continue this conversation, but I remember Noah coming home from school and really learning about Martin Luther King, right? Like, and him bawling in my arms, like, Mama, they killed him because he was Black, and Papa is Black. And I remember, like, there's some poignant moments, and yet our kids are sheltered as shit. They just are. And I think you and I are waking up to, like, we've got, I think, enough of a foundation to be able to share more with them. Maybe we'll do a conversation on race and kids. But him being devastated that because they're not afraid of you. Like, and I've never ever been afraid of you. Like
Mhm.
but they love their papa. They know you're Black. They know that we're a mixed race family, but um, maybe that's a conversation for another time. How do we talk to kids about this?
Yeah.
Or
Well, and
how are
here's
we talking to our kids about
yeah,
it?
and here's the thing about that conversation lays the groundwork for the future. Like,
Right.
it's not okay to model the behaviors that you see, exhibited other places, when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like,
Right.
and I mean, it's a whole nother conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Well, wrapping this conversation, what final thoughts do you want to share?
I mean, we are, we're, you look at our DNA, man, we're so much more alike than we are different, but we're not, we don't think that way. Like, we're not wired to think that way. We're wired to look for
We haven't
difference.
been conditioned that way.
Right. There's not a lion out there anymore, right? There's not a wolf outside the door. I don't need to be suspicious of everybody, people who don't look like me. Um, I don't know. We are different. That's just a truth, but we share more in common than we don't. And I don't know. That's as far as I've gotten right now.
Yeah.
And
I think for me, final thoughts are it's about pay attention to where you're feeling defensive right now
mm-hmm.
and pay attention to what you're defending with your defensiveness. And that does come down to self-reflection. And I know where I'm getting defensive, like when I'm learning new words and phrases, and I do feel late to the conversation in many ways, but I also feel activated around where I feel defensive. And I would have you pay attention to your defensiveness, not taking action from it, but as a witness to your defensiveness. So thank you for being willing to have this conversation. I know it's not always like you're not the one that wants to do all the talking all the time, but I appreciate you being willing to do
Yeah,
this.
it's this stage in the game. If I can contribute to a conversation that is beneficial, I'll muddle my way through it. So,
well, more muddling to be had, friends. So
yeah.
Thank you for joining us. We have not been looking at the comments, but we will take a look at them, and more to come from us, not as experts in anything, but as in people who are having conversations that you can have too.
Yeah,
So
it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
yeah. And it's the doors are wide open. So thank you for joining us, friends. Stay tuned. We'll be with you again soon. And I'm going to disconnect here, babe. Just hold on. Okay. Thank you, friends. We will see you again soon.